Let's take another look at that ad. Here's what it said. Big sale at Jeff's Electronics. Huge savings on hundreds of items. Phones, computers, TVs, dishwashers, refrigerators, washers, and dryers. Any electronic item you'd ever need. All the name brands are here, the one sale you won't want to miss all year. Best brands, best features, biggest savings. Don't miss it. Come out to Jeff's today. But what if the ad had been a more literal representation of the actual sale? Big sale at Jeff's Electronics, but mainly on off-brand items. Huge savings on hundreds of items that are already low-priced. Phones, computers, TVs, dishwashers, refrigerators, washers, and dryers. We have any electronic item you'd ever need, but the most desirable items are not on sale. All the name brands are here, but not all on sale. The one sale you won't want to miss all year if you're in the market for a killer deal on a generic brand. Best brands, best features, but not the biggest savings. Don't miss it. Come out to Jeff's today. If I'd seen this ad, I would have known what I'd get with this sale, and I probably would have passed on it. But a literal representation is not necessarily the same thing as a literal meaning. A literal representation is a piece of writing that describes something in a very factual way without metaphors and figures of speech. It isn't poetic. It doesn't try to suggest or imply anything about what is being described. So this would not be a literal description of a difficult business meeting because it's almost entirely metaphorical. Sitting in that meeting was like enduring slow torture, and I was climbing the walls to get out of there. But this is a literal description of a difficult business meeting. I was uncomfortable in that meeting because everyone was so angry and tense, and in the end, nothing useful was decided. In the first description, you don't really get an idea about why the meeting was difficult. You get one metaphor involving torture mixed with another metaphor for escape, but not anything that says why the meeting was bad. In the second description, however, you can get a pretty good literal idea for why the meeting was bad. Metaphors and figures of speech are common sorts of figurative language. If someone says, "That dog don't hunt," about something someone else said, that person is using a figure of speech. It's figurative language because that person isn't talking about a real dog. The dog, in this case, is the statement, and the dog don't hunt because there's something about the statement that isn't right. Saying something sounds fishy is another example of figurative language. A fishy smell is a bad smell. If I say something sounds fishy, I mean that there's something off about it. The thing doesn't literally smell bad. Statements can't have an actual smell, but it's the linguistic equivalent of a big stinking pile of fish. The phrase, "big stinking pile of fish," is an example of literal language, or at least it is if I'm using those words to describe an actual big stinking pile of fish. If I have an obnoxious task I need to do, and I really don't want to do it, and I call that task a big stinking pile of fish, then that's figurative language because I'm not talking about literal fish. Literal meaning is a bit different from literal representation. All pieces of writing have a literal meaning. That's what the words the writer is using literally say. For example, let's say a friend wrote this to me. I put down the letter, I walked out into my garden, I started to turn the soil to plant a flower, but then I stopped and I sat there for I don't know how long, staring into space. It's easy to understand the literal meaning of the words here. My friend put down a letter, went out to the garden, started to plant a flower, and then stopped and stared into space. It's very clear what those words mean on a literal level. But even if I didn't have any context for what is going on here, I'd still know that something is wrong. People don't start doing something and then just stop for no reason and stare off into space for a long time. That's not normal. There's something wrong here, but it's not on the surface. It's something I can see because I can read between the lines. My friend actually wrote this to me. I got a letter from the college I was hoping to get into, and I was worried because it was so thin and light. I was nervous opening it up, and sure enough, it was a rejection letter. I had counted so much on getting into that school. I put down the letter, I walked out into my garden, I started to turn the soil to plant a flower, but then I stopped and I sat there for I don't know how long, staring into space. This makes it clear what the problem was. It's there at the literal level of my friend's words. She got a letter of rejection from the college she had really hoped to get into. But inference still plays a part here. Knowing that my friend was rejected, I can figure out from the rest of this that she was upset. But she never says she was upset. I can figure that out from the context of the situation and from how she just stared into space. She was hurt and she didn't know what to do. I can get that from what she wrote without her having to spell it out for me because that part of her writing is at the level of inference. Pieces of writing often have a literal level and a level of inference. The moment any writer begins to suggest ideas or moods or emotions without directly describing them, the writer begins to work at both the literal level and the inferential level. At the literal level, everything is clearly spelled out. Understanding the literal meaning of a piece of writing just involves understanding what each word means. It's that simple, as long as the words and the writing are simple to understand and not a description of quantum physics or something like that. If a political ad says, "You can trust James Kent because he tells it like it is," then the literal meaning of that sentence is exactly what it says. I can trust Kent because what he says is the truth. At the inferential level, you have to read between the lines. You have to pay close attention to what the details of what you're reading suggest to you. If a political ad says, "You can trust James Kent because he tells it like it is," then what is that really saying? It's saying that Kent is honest, sure. But if this is being given as a reason to vote for Kent and not for the other candidate, then isn't this implying that the other candidate isn't honest and a straight talker? That's the inference I'd take from it. Congratulations, you've completed this section. Keep up the good work and move on to the next section.